at 31,000 feet today. It looks like smooth air, so just sit back and enjoy the flight. Alien aircraft at 2 and 10 o'clock. Oh, not again.
Ah, crap.
They're firing at us. Arm the catapult. Let's zap those suckers. We're hit. We're hit. Get your tail out of there, man. Jump. Jump.
With games like R-Type DX and Conker's Pocket Tales now in color, you might actually forget where you are. Game Boy Color. Get into it.
The Game Boy Color, manufactured by Nintendo, it was released on October 21st, 1998 in Japan, and was released in November of the same year in international markets. The Game Boy Color, as suggested by the name, features a colored screen but no backlight. It is slightly thicker and taller than the Game Boy Pocket, which is a redesign of the original Game Boy released in 1996. As with the original Game Boy, it has an 8-bit processor as well. While mostly retaining the same hardware as the original Game Boy, the Game Boy Color's primary competitors, which were the much more advanced Neo Geo Pocket by SNK and the Wonder Swan by Bandai, which was released in Japan only. Though the Game Boy Color outsold these by a huge margin, the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color combined have sold 118.69 million units. It was discontinued in 2003, shortly after the release of the Game Boy Advance SP, although I didn't get my hands on one until the release of the second-gen Pokemon game, and once I got it I couldn't put it down. All I ever had up to this now was those damn Tiger Electronics, and that's a video for another day.
You are all that stands between Gotham City and the forces of destruction in the Batman Returns handheld game from Tiger.
What do you want?
To destroy the Penguin's evil army.
The time has come to punish all!
Defeat the Catwoman. Face the Penguin in 5 levels of skill.
You don't really think you'll win, do you?
The Batman Returns handheld electronic game, now playing in a pocket near you.
Games that are designed specifically for the Game Boy Color are housed in clear colored cartridges that are shaped slightly different from the original Game Boy games. These games would display a warning message and refuse to play if used on an older Game Boy model. Games that are designed for the Game Boy Color, but which also include backwards compatibility with the previous Game Boy systems, are shaped like the original Game Boy games. They usually have black color cartridges. Pokemon Gold and Silver are also examples of Game Boy Color games that work with the original Game Boy system. The clear-colored Game Boy Color cartridges will function correctly only when used in a Game Boy Color or later model, a Game Boy Advance SP, or the Game Boy Player. Now, I haven't been much into handheld gaming in some time, but at one point in my life, that's all I did. If I had to go somewhere with my parents, yeah, I'm taking my Game Boy. What? My parents won't turn on the lights in the car? That's okay, because accessories, and more accessories. The market was flooded with these kinds of things. Some things that would make your handheld just look crazy. So let's take a look at some of the games. I played the hell out of the Game Boy Color. Let's go ahead and start off with the obvious. Pokemon Gold and Silver. Now unfortunately, as stated, I wasn't lucky enough to own the first Game Boy or the Game Boy Pocket. You know, the first Game Boy that took 4 AA batteries. But I was able to start at the Game Boy Color. It's here where I would get to play all the Pokemon games, even Pokemon Yellow. Since I was watching the anime at the time, knowing that you get all of the starter Pokemon on Yellow made that the best of the Gen 1 games. However, Silver and Gold really stepped up their game, allowing you to travel to a whole different region called the Johto region, filled with brand new Pokemon and gyms for you to conquer. However, this is not what made the game for me. It was the fact that once you beat the game with the Elite Four, in Johto, you were able to take the SS Anne back to Kanto and face off against the Gen 1 gym leaders, in any order you want. Then followed by the protagonists of the first games, known as Red. I haven't been able to play the remakes called Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but I hear they do live up to being proper remakes, and I would probably go this route if you're looking to visit these games. Also, the trading card game wasn't too bad, but more of my time went into the actual card game than here. Staying on the topic of anime, Dragon Ball Z Legendary Super Warriors is a game that if I knew how much of my childhood I put into this, the number could be frightening. It's a turn-based fighting game that's played with in-game cards for attacks, techniques, and support items. Kind of like Dragon Ball Z Legend of the Super Saiyan for the Super Famicom. The game's story takes place from the start of Dragon Ball Z, the Saiyan Saga, and runs to the end of the Buu Saga. The game also includes 2 extra stories involving future Trunks' timeline. The game boasts a large array of characters for a Game Boy Color game, featuring all of the Ginyu Force Super Saiyan forms for all characters that reach it, as well as fusion characters Vegito and Gotenks. Once the game has been completed, the player is free to replay the story or battle mode, and has the freedom to use any character and forms they choose in any given battle. During the player's second playthrough, they may be able to unlock additional characters if certain criteria is met. This game, while it may not be the prettiest thing to look at, was super addicting. It's one of the best DBZ games on a handheld at the time, until we would later see Dragon Ball Z Legacy of Goku 2 on the Game Boy Advance, but that's a topic for another time. While most of my time was spent on these 2 games, I couldn't leave this game out, Mega Man Extreme. It's a spin-off of the Mega Man X series of video games that originated on the Super Nintendo. Mega Man Extreme takes place within the series timeline during the 22nd century, in which a group of quote-unquote maverick androids called the Shadow Hunters hack into a world's mother computer system, destabilize all of the networks, and allow all other Mavericks to control rampant destruction all over the world. The hero Maverick Hunter, Mega Man X, is tasked with going into cyberspace to relive his past missions and put a stop to the group's plans. Now, I never beat this game. This game is hard. And I mean hard. This is probably why Pokemon got much more of my attention, and it was way less stressful. The last North American Game Boy Color exclusive game was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Although it was released on different consoles, the Game Boy Color featured an exclusive version. Not too long after this, the Game Boy Color would fade out by Nintendo. But they had something else up their sleeve, and it was definitely worth the wait. Well, that's the Game Boy Color. It has a nostalgia place in my heart for being my first actual handheld system. What was your first handheld? And tell me what games you spent the most time with. As always, everyone, thanks for watching. Consider subscribing and liking if you enjoyed it. Up next week, we're taking a trip down memory lane and going to revisit one of my favorite games of all time, Final Fantasy VII.